Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 9.11. And of course, we're playing as Japan, and we're trying to save Iraq or Saudi Arabia and push in there. We just had a naval battle, which was inconclusive. Shot up our light carriers. They had 3 CVs, not CVLs, CVs. So they were pretty strong. These guys should have been out, but notice they're sort of been healing up, but not very well on this little island. So, yeah, let's see about putting you to sea. Yeah, we can come out here. Convoy rating, passive. I should pay more attention to these guys. Okay, you come back over here where we can get bigger ports, better repair. We overstressed this small port. The Taiho, yeah, they're just too shot up. We need to get you repaired. Yes, they were definitely a serious threat. Japan really had some serious problems with its battles, shall we say, because they weren't technically, well, they weren't fully at war, at least. Yeah, we'll get you out too. Hopefully they'll all escort out in a group. Took serious losses to the Soviets. Not that Japan didn't have some tactical victories now and again, but they were basically beaten at all major turns by the Soviets. Okay. Well. Absolutely. They could have done Japan did very poorly at commerce raiding with submarines, maybe commerce raiding in general. Oh yes, it would be. That's why I have built an air base there. Six Eyes, I guess we'll call you Six Eyes. Maybe, but we'll see a bit later. I don't know. I don't know exactly what you're meaning by that. Turns Hearts of Iron 4 into 3. I would be fascinated by. Uh-oh, another battle here. Oh, our CAGs are going out, or their CAGs are coming after my ships as we run away. Oh, please don't sink anything. Okay, well, now we are battling the CVs again. Don't know where they're going, if they're looking for us. We're trying to get out of here. I think we're just going to delete that invasion because we're not prepared for that invasion. Invasion's a good idea. Yes, they were also very poor at anti-submarine warfare. You're absolutely right. Okay, we have lost a pocket battleship, which I'm not surprised at, and but we've taken out a CV and a destroyer and a landing craft. But we are going to keep running away. No, not you guys. Hopefully you still have the transports yet, so the units aren't dead. Okay, keep going. Once you're here, okay, keep going, keep going. We're going to run away real fast. Run away. Yeah, well, the Japanese tanks, yeah, well, none of them were good, that's for sure. They were okay-ish, which is a little better than sucks if you're talking about anti-infantry roles, but battling other tanks, you're absolutely right. They weren't any good at that. They're getting reorganized and they're pushing there, that's good. Okay, so now they're counterattacking up to there, but we've got that handled with troops. This pocket's being reduced. No, you stop going that way. You come down that way. You guys come here. I don't know much about modern Japanese tanks. I know they do have a good modern tank, but I just quite honestly don't know much about it. So I can't evaluate whether I agree with you or not. I'm not saying you're wrong, I just don't know. Yeah, more stuff. Okay. Well, let's go for another good armor division. No. Motorized battalion, armored cars, motorized engineers, truck transports, motorized support, yeah, regular artillery and an HQ. I don't know that we may substitute a better one later on, but that will help battle the Americans. Yes, everything better. It early in the war with Japan, either someone asked or someone stated, I forget, but they just sort of, off the spur of the moment said, we need 150 carriers. America, said, as this is the time I think we had 3 real proper carriers. I'm not talking about the Langley or whatnot, but talking about real the 3 carriers that didn't get sunk at Midway. We had 3 carriers. We need 150 carriers. That's like, yeah, right. 150 characters. Well, when the war ends, the U.S. has in operation, if I remember the number right, 113 aircraft carriers. Now, they had others building, but when the war ends, and they had 113 aircraft carriers, America had. Now, that includes the CVEs and the CVLs, the light carriers and the escort carriers, the sort of the Jeep carriers. So it includes they weren't all the big CVs, but 113 aircraft carriers, and then plus all the other ships to support them, and all the aircraft that support them. Not just the aircraft on board the ships, but the other supporting elements. And that's just carriers. That's way more than anybody else was building at the time. So it really shows that Japan had no chance. Neither really did Germany. Yeah, well, we no longer fly the SR-71. It's grounded. I don't think there's any flying operational versions now. Yeah, Japan really could use tanks, and they did use them. They used them in the Philippines invasions and other ones. I recently read an article about the American tanks that fought the Japanese tanks in the Philippines. And it was interesting. It was actually one of the elite American armor units was sent out there to the Philippines. They got there just like a month or so, maybe 2 months before the war breaks out. They're not released any gasoline of any amount to train with their tanks. So they're from somewhere in the center part of America. So they're not used to driving around in the Philippines, the terrain and such. So they have no gasoline to do so. They're all the Stuart light tanks. Sorry, I'm meaning to get something to drink, but they're the Stuart light tanks. So they have the 37 millimeter guns. They're issued no high explosive rounds are sent out, only armor piercing rounds. And so they get out there with these tanks. They don't get to train with them. They sit there, and then the Japanese invade. And there are a few still fighting into the last days of the Luzon, the peninsula there. into the last days of that. They actually get a hold of some other 35 millimeter, I forget, was it Japanese ammo or somebody's ammo, and shove it, the projectile, and shove it into the casings that they had to make up some sort of homebrew high explosive rounds that are somewhat effective. But it's a miserable failure because they were just they were really an elite unit, but they were completely unprepared for it, and just no real communication with other forces around. It was just a shambles. Had that unit been effectively trained locally, I mean, it was a really good training unit, trained up in America, but had they been able to get trained up, and it was just a waste, they would have been very effective against the Japanese armor. And I'm not saying they would have won the Philippine campaign, but just that the few companies of tanks could really have changed the way that whole thing was fought. It was really bad. No, we know it's basically been they've gone back to using just the U2s because they're cheaper to run. The SR-71s are hugely expensive to run, and since we're able to do spy satellites so effectively, the SR-71s are just not really needed. Space Navy. Well, it's needed. Now, do we need a lot of people in spaceships flying around the planet right now? No, but what we need to do is have a force, whether it ends up becoming calling Space Force, is sort of named after the Air Force. But we need to have a and Arno, you're the one people supposed to keeping me on topic of the game, but we need to have a force that is set up to control space outside of aerospace. Get out there. And what the big thing is to have missiles set up to immediately start knocking satellites out of the sky. That's the big thing. And globally, to knock out any enemy satellite out there. And so if you go to war, immediately all your satellites go away. And then if we think some nation is feeding satellite, some supposedly neutral nations feeding satellite information, we just knock those satellites out. So it needs to be an anti-satellite program. And if you look at it in that format, things that shoot down satellites, they can also shoot down ballistic missiles up in space too. So that's also technically a ballistic missile shield force as well. So if you look at it in those sort of lights, it's a very important thing. I know a lot of people are making fun of it because it's Trump, but really it's just a Ronald Reagan Star Wars, the SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative. I'm old enough to remember all of that. They said it was, made jokes about it back then, but it's really just that moving forward, and it's a good idea. Oh, well, they had fuel, IKB, but in the Philippines, but the quartermaster corps or whatever wouldn't release it to the tank company. They wouldn't. No, you don't. No, we're not letting you have any fuel. There was fuel in there, but the company or battalion or whatever that was sent, it wasn't bigger than a battalion. It was a fairly small. I think it was just a couple of companies, not a full battalion, if I remember correctly. They didn't, have a full logistics train, and so they were sort of dependent upon the local U.S. Army establishment, which really didn't. What are these metal things? Kind of like, what good are they? And so they didn't release training fuel. Now, of course, once the battle gets started, they get fuel, but then they come. I think it's maybe this river here. They come up here and get some tanks shot up, but then with one of these rivers, maybe not on this map. There's a whole, at least a platoon on the far side of the river, and they blow the bridge up, and so as it retreats back, they go, oh, we can't get back here. So they have to destroy their tanks and just, march back across the river. I don't think it was that that, like maybe swim, I don't know. But and then at least one or two of the tanks that are later seen Japanese operating. I mean, they did what they could to make them non-operational, but the Japanese were even operating against them. That's how freaking bad the whole thing was. It was just a farce. Yeah, you got the Merkava there, 3 or 6 eyes. Yeah, that really is Dark Star. The first time I've seen significant American forces. That I have seen some forces out here going after some submarines. We can see, you know, these are mostly aircraft. These are our electric boats that are seeming to do okay in hiding from their aircraft. But it's the first real. Thanks, Arno. Has someone court-martialed? No, no one was court-martialed over the mess. They all just went to Japanese prisoner of war camps for their, or died for their sins, as it were. So yeah, no one to court-martial over that. It was just, yep, we lost. You get to spend the rest of the war in prisoner of war camps. Japanese ones at that. So yeah, that was their punishment. I really feel so bad for the tank crews. One of the early operations was during, I think it was the Tennessee maneuvers or something. One of the major maneuver things. The judges determined that the only way a tank can take out for the maneuvers, at least, and so this is what they think in real life. The only way a tank can take out an anti-tank gun is to actually drive over it. And of course, no one had anti-tank guns for the maneuvers, but they had, you know, wooden mock-ups, because the U.S. at that time, like this is 1939 or 1940. I don't know which one exactly this was, but it's in that time frame. The U.S. did not have any anti-tank guns, but I mean, they had field artillery pieces, you know, that could knock out a tank, but no dedicated anti-tank guns. But the only way you can take out an anti-tank gun is by driving over it. And so they drove over them in maneuvers when they could. And obviously the people would run away from it before they drove over it, and they'd drive over some wooden mock-up. But they actually, one of the first kill of a Japanese anti-tank gun, because Japanese did have some, was to drive over it, although they did shoot some up. So it was just a real cock-up mess with the armor. And it wasn't, in my opinion, the armor, the tanker's faults. It was command's faults at many levels. Oh, you guys need to advance. Oh no, you're still defending. Okay. Okay, mountain HQs, very good. We'll do naval HQs, switch that over there, and we'll click here and get some extra HQs, which I'm not using well. I'm using them, but not using them well. Well, the U.S. did not have a good solution for the anti-tank gun. They decided the most important, the U.S. infantry, because they're the ones who are going to use it through the Ordnance Department or whatever, decided the most important element for an anti-tank gun was that the infantry should be able to handle it easily and effectively. So now, remember, this is being decided very late 1940, very early 41. Because remember, the U.S. does not get in the war until December 41. So it's effectively a 42 start date. So sometime late 40 / mid to early to mid 41, the United States Army determines the most important element for an anti-tank gun is that the infantry be able to handle it really easily, get it in and out of place and move it around. So they decide that the 37 millimeter anti-tank gun is what they should use. they should develop and build one. Now, of course, there's another school of thought that the anti-tank gun's primary design element purpose would be to kill an enemy tank. But no. Killing an enemy tank, that's useful, but most useful is that we move it around easily. So they develop a 37 millimeter anti-tank gun at the time. Oh, and the British are, of course, feeding all their information to the Americans of what they're facing in 1940 and then in 41 in North Africa. And of course, the British are feeding you in the information that you need a bigger than a 37 millimeter anti-tank gun. But yeah, that's what the we're gonna stop and counterattack here. The Americans are doing. So there's a lot of mess up going on at this stuff. I don't know that the Abrams does have the best, because I know it's a very good one, but I think it may be overly technologically dependent. So I'm not saying it's bad, but I don't know if you shoot down all of our satellites if it's going to work. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and if I, if I wasn't worried about the flow, these HQs, some are mountain HQs, I should be better utilizing, and I have utilized some of like the HQs as occupation forces around, and if I was doing that better, it would be better. Okay, we're gonna end the episode. Not the stream, guys, but we're gonna end the episode here. Save game. LP. So, okay. So everyone watching later on YouTube, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for liking the videos if you haven't already. Please subscribe to the channel, and of course, I love hearing from you, so please post questions, comments, suggestions. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.